I'm going to take you back in deep into story again. Are you okay?
Okay.
All right. So
Yeah,
I'm going to
that's
ask you
fine.
some questions. So, all right. So we're talking about the behind enemy lines. And so here's one of the things that it's always been visualized for me. And that is that it almost seems like I guess there's an idea of there being this home base that you go to and like you go out, but it almost seemed too like there was this constant like moving along in the desert where you just keep going. And then there's the other thing too that I think might be worthwhile mentioning is the, talking about, you don't have to get into like, I don't want you to put on like academic hat and then start just giving us the facts, but as a Green Beret, one of the things being, this is what's standing out to me is you talked about, not wanting to develop those relationships and things like that. And with the dog and so forth. And like, we're here to do this and like, don't get attached. But then there's also this other part of Green Beret where it's like, go in and embed into the culture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have an idea of where you're going with this.
Yes.
Yeah. Um, um, yeah, there's a huge relationship piece within SF. And because a lot of times, almost all the time, you're working with a partner force, and that partner force is a local, national, indigenous force. They're not Americans, in other words. And yeah, there's a lot of contradiction there for myself. Is that especially like my first trip to Afghanistan, me and one of my other teammates, it wasn't just us, but we spent a lot of time building up, selecting, training, and putting together over 100-man fighting force. And me and my other teammate, we spent a lot of time with those guys. Like the whole team was a part of the selection and the training and all that. But um, and for this fighting force, like we were responsible for everything for them, like all of their logistics, like their food, their pay. If somebody wasn't working out or whatever, like we fired them. We found new people, whatever. But me and my other teammates spent so much time with them, like, ate with them, like spent so much time on the range with them, or just I don't know, like establishing this relationship with them that they would do anything for the team as a whole. But I noticed they had a special like connection, or maybe more of a desire to help me and my other teammate out, like us two
Uh-huh.
specifically. And I can remember where this became evident to me is that there was a Marine unit right outside of our fire base that hit an IED, and we responded to it. And a part of that, we're securing the high ground, and also too trying to find like if this thing is remote detonated or any kind of intel associated with this IED, like if the person remote detonated, left something behind, or just understanding if we can get from their vantage point, we can understand a lot more about how the enemy is operating, and therefore can, either prevent something like that happening again or be able to counteract some of that stuff. This other teammate, his name is Damien, and he'd already had at least a couple deployments before me, but this guy, when I finished Robin Sage, I had earned my Green Beret. Um, Damien taught me how to be a Green Beret. And so he did. He really spent a lot of time with me. Like he taught me a lot. But one of the things that he taught me is that when we're walking up on the mountains and stuff, like there's mines and stuff from when the Soviets were there. I mean, it's not so much of an issue, but like, there's a possibility of something like that. Not very high though. But knowing that the enemy, knowing that we may try and secure the high ground, or we may try and go after them, the trigger guy for the IED, they may leave behind some kind of other like anti-personnel type mine, or, some kind of other device that we would step on or whatever. And then there would be more casualties. And so one of the things that Damien taught me was that he's like, hey, if you can avoid it, don't step on the dirt. Always walk on the rocks. And so I was doing that, and just being very cautious of we essentially found where the trigger guy for the IED was. And so being very cautious about that particular area, knowing that they know that we're going to really investigate it. And if we're overturning stuff, it's really easy to put some kind of, device underneath that. And then you've like killed more guys kind of thing.
Got you.
And I had this Afghan force with me up on the high ground. And when we got to that space, they saw my cautiousness with it, like my deliberateness with that space. And anything that I was going to overturn was just like I was looking at it to make sure that if I move this, I'm not seeing any kind of exposed wires or explosive or like anti-personnel mine or anything like that. And they stopped me and then went ahead, and like there are several instances where it's like, okay, some kind of contact in whatever form is likely, and they're stopping me and putting themselves in that situation, which is really nice to think about, in terms of just, because, I mean, we really did care about what we're doing and the people. And yeah, and so it's like a huge contradiction in a way. And I've heard people talk about Green Berets in this way, is that how they can be so nice, so friendly, so smart, but also still be so lethal. And yeah, it's a strange thing. And I don't know, maybe there's something unique with that. I don't know. But yeah, it seems like a big contradiction in a way.
Well, I mean, I think one of the things that you mentioned, there is no line, right? Like there's no behind enemy lines. It's just, and I think that also speaks to there's no us versus them. There is, but because they're intermixed with the Americans when you are with that, indigenous force, right? The ones that you're like working with, they're there with you. It's not just like only Americans only can be in this. It's intermixed. And so then that person is an Afghani and so is the other, the other person. And I'm curious, and you said you hear people speak about Green Berets and that they can be, they can be smart and personable and all these sort of things. And then there's also this lethal aspect. What does that make you think when you hear that or feel?
The first time I heard someone say something like that, I was like, wow, that's really observant. Because I hadn't thought about it that way myself. And I feel surprised by that because I don't think that's a common observation. Well, I'd say maybe it's not common knowledge, I would say. I don't think people have that idea about SF in general. I think it's someone who probably was not in SF who spent a lot of time with them and made that observation, I think.
Would you say that with them, was it the same thing where you were kind of closing off that emotional sense and it was just part of the day to day, or did you feel like you were actually starting to make emotional connections there?
From my first trip, I don't know if at a certain point, on my first trip was very different from my last trip, because on my last trip, I was spending more time with either, talking to bad guys or unknowns. So like they may be bad guys, but I don't know, in terms of like interacting with Afghans. And that was part of that had to do with, actually, a lot of that had to do with just my job changing within SF. But also too, this kind of made it more convenient to be more closed off. And because like somebody else had that job now of building a relationship, like, my last trip on active duty, we had over 100 guys that manned all of our OPs, and those guys needed training. And also too, if like you're counting on these people out in the middle of nowhere to alert you if something, if like the enemy's trying to move on the fire base, or if you're not wanting them to be bought off, and whether it's paid for or if they're like flipped by the enemy, you want these people to be your friends, you want them to care about you, and so you need to care about them as well. And that just wasn't my job anymore. And I do remember, it's fascinating to think about this now, because it's kind of bookends where my first trip to Afghanistan started out where like me and Damien were their most special people on the team. My last trip on active duty, these guys that manned all of our OPs and everything, and they did do missions too. They gave everyone on the team a rug. Actually, I have it right in front of me right now.
Really?
This is the rug
Oh, wow.
that they gave everybody on the team, which is a very special gift considering that like these guys make like, the average income at that time was like a couple $100 a year, for an Afghan. And so for them to give, a dozen rugs kind of thing that they bought, with their money was just really nice. But it was how much they, part of it was all of it was because of how much they loved the team. But part of that was because of the relationship of the guys that were doing things like I did on my first trip. And the other part of it is that they just loved how like much we were doing in their area, like just how many missions and just how much we were doing, kind of like this aggressive approach to all of this. But I don't remember what it was, but they gave 2 guys on the team something much nicer, And I remember thinking it's like, oh, this was like, I've done that before. I've been that guy before.
Yeah.
And it's kind of interesting how there's bookends of that for my deployments, to where the first one is where I was that guy so close. And then at the end, not, but seeing it reflected in someone else. Hey, thanks for watching this video. If you got a lot of value out of it, or if you know someone who could get some value out of these, please share this channel with them. Also, if you subscribe and leave comments, I try and respond to every single one of them. Thank you guys again, and we'll see you.